Good evening. It's been a relatively calm and successful primary election day in Pennsylvania. As always, I'd like to thank the hundreds of county election officials and the approximately 45,000 poll workers who made democracy possible today. Because of them, Pennsylvanians were able to cast their vote at more than 9,000 precincts across 67 counties. A quiet day like today is a testament to the hard work and dedication of our county election officials, especially those new ones who are running elections for the first time and have done their part to make sure voters in their counties can cast their ballot and make their voice heard. While these are lower profile elections, in my experience, they are some of the most complex. There are so many different candidates running for so many different offices down ticket at the local level that makes them a particular challenge. Nevertheless, we had reports of only a few minor and isolated issues occurring in the Commonwealth. One of the data points I typically mention on Election Day is the number of calls we received to our voter hotline. In 2023, the last municipal primary election, the Department of State received about 600 hotline calls. Today, we received approximately 500. It's not an insignificant number, of course, but it does demonstrate that Pennsylvania voters overwhelmingly encountered an improved voting experience this year. With a successful primary election day behind them, election workers in all 67 counties will now undertake the task of counting votes. I urge you to be patient. This work takes time. Pennsylvania County set out approximately 800,000 ballots for this primary, and as of 7:30 p.m., counties were reporting at least 70% of those ballots had been returned. It's important to remember that counties could not even begin processing and opening those mail ballots until 7 a.m. today, and that the last of them were received only about an hour or so ago, by 8 p.m. While we all want to know the results as soon as possible in every election, county election officials' priority is to accurately count every eligible vote and to do so with integrity. You can find the latest unofficial results of statewide judicial races on the department's website, electionreturns.pa.gov. As you see results come into the website, remember, all results are unofficial until certification happens in a few weeks, and increases in vote tallies in the coming days are to be expected as county officials canvass all ballots, including provisional ballots. I'd like to thank our partners in local, state, and federal government who worked hard to help ensure the safety and security of elections. These partnerships are instrumental to the department's ability to support county election officials and poll workers on the ground on this and every election day. And while it's never part of my prepared remarks, I want to say just how grateful I am to work with the incredibly talented, incredibly dedicated, and hardworking team at the Pennsylvania Department of State. I had the opportunity to work with them as a partner for a decade prior to coming into this role, but it is a testament to the county election officials and to the team at the Pennsylvania Department of State when Election Day runs smoothly. And finally, I want to thank every eligible Pennsylvania voter who voted in today's municipal election. Every vote is precious, and your voice matters. I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have. Jordan.
Yes, thank you very much. Is it too early to tell whether or not there are going to be any particularly close races, as often happens in municipal elections?
Yeah, it really is. And especially with so many races at the local level that might only involve a couple of precincts, you have a higher likelihood of more races being close. They don't usually get a lot of attention, but this election cycle, you had not only a couple of statewide judicials and in common pleas or municipal court judicial races, but you had tax collectors, you had school boards. You had any number of township level offices that really have a huge impact on people's everyday life. So the more offices you have, the greater likelihood that you will have races that are close. But it's way too early to tell, especially, at the top of the ticket, whether we'll see any close races or not.
There are two things for if there are any close races that are really important for making sure that they're correct. There's the possibility of a recount, and there's the requirement of an audit. Could you just talk about what requirements need to be met for there to be a recount in municipal races, as there was in the fall?
Yes. So there's a statewide threshold for recount. So there wouldn't be for kind of municipal or other offices like that. But for statewide office, I believe it's 0.5% for an automatic recount to be initiated as a result. After every election, our counties undergo two audits, and they're really two different types of audits. One is typically referred to as a 2% audit, which is an audit of 2% of the ballots cast in that county. And the other is a risk limiting audit. And you'll see more from us in the days ahead. Philadelphia and a couple other counties pioneered this some years ago, which is a sort of scientific method for randomly selecting ballots from batches to audit their accuracy that confirms that the tabulated election results were accurate.
You mentioned there are some new election officials, and this is a particularly complex election with all the different precincts, candidates in different precincts within a county. How did you support your new election officials to be ready for this election, and how does that then prepare them for larger elections down the road?
I think one thing that we saw, especially after 2020, was not just in Pennsylvania, but across the country, pretty significant attrition and turnover for county election officials. And it was multi-causal. There's the changing environment over the past half a dozen years. There are people who are just ready to retire. There's any number of reasons for that to occur. But we did see significant turnover. So the Pennsylvania Department of State, in advance of the 2024 election, stood up a training team or a training unit led by an experienced county election director so that when new people were put in charge of running elections at their county, however many weeks or months prior to Election Day, they were able to receive training. So we identified a whole number of different modules to really work with them to make sure that election directors and county election officials were preparing for the election to do all the things they needed to do, whether it's ordering paper to make sure they had the paper to print ballots on, to make sure that they were trained up on logic and accuracy testing, to make sure that they had everything prepared in advance of the election. And that was really well received. And we've heard a lot of positive feedback from our county partners about that resource now being available at the Pennsylvania Department of State. I think it's one of the more significant things that we've done in the election space in the last couple of years is providing that resource to the counties, who really, at the end of the day, are the people most responsible for running elections in the Commonwealth.
There are several election bills in front of the House and the Senate right now. Does this election give you any insight or any lessons in what is really needed to improve election processes in Pennsylvania?
No, I don't think there's anything new that we did not already experience before. The strain that counties are under when it comes to pre-canvassing, for example, which in Pennsylvania, as you know, can only begin at 7 a.m. on election morning. Plenty of other states begin that days, if not weeks, in advance, even if they're not tabulating or reporting a single result prior to the closing of polls on Election Day. They at least get to do a lot of that prep work so that the results earlier without in any way compromising the integrity of the process. That's an issue we knew about before. That's an issue that we've had in every election, certainly since 2020.
And I think my last question here, though if you want me to keep going, I can. So as elections get larger and news cycles get louder, so do disinformation narratives. As far as I'm aware, we didn't see Russia making up any fake videos for this round of elections. But for people like me who like to keep track of those things, there's certainly Reddit threads and certain Twitter channels, profiles that are still commenting on this election cycle. Have you seen anything of note, or is the department doing anything in particular to counter any disinformation or work to improve trust in the cycle?
Yes, and in advance of the 2024 election, this is something we did gave a lot of thought to. And then what is the best approach to combating mis and disinformation? Do you fight against every lie that you see on Twitter day and night, as some county election officials, many of whom I admire, have done? Do you ignore it altogether, as some other states have done? For us to try to get the porridge just right, it was a matter of really keeping an eye on misinformation efforts that have gone viral and got some traction, to make sure that on our social media accounts we were always sharing the truth about elections parallel to those misinformation narratives. So they informed our voter education efforts, even if we weren't going back and forth with some knucklehead day and night to combat their lies on their thread, which also potentially, obviously, amplifies their lies. So I think we had a very good approach I think we got the approach just right this last election cycle, and every county and every state is learning how to do that better and better in this new environment.
And have you had to do this for the municipal elections, or did you find that sort of the virality of these claims were pretty quiet?
Primaries are always a little bit different, at least in my experience, in terms of the volume of mis and disinformation, because it's really Republicans competing against Republicans, Democrats competing against Democrats, races mostly lower profile. So while we sort of keep an eye on it to make sure we're aware of that mis and disinformation environment, there was a significant difference compared to the election last year in 2024 and certainly 2020. Okay, thank you.